The morning light spread over the fields like a warm blanket, soft and golden. The air was calm but heavy with the smell of dust and dry grass. Birds flew low, their wings cutting through the stillness that covered the old lands. Far above, the sky carried a faint shimmer from the floating cities. They looked like silver clouds from the ground, shining bright in the distance. For most people, Earth had become a forgotten place, a planet left behind by progress. But for one man, it was still home, though he had not set foot on it for years. Rian stood near the small shuttle window as it descended through the thin layers of the atmosphere. His reflection looked older than he remembered. His hair had turned more gray than black. His face showed lines of success and loneliness. He had built empires in space, opened trade routes between colonies, and collected more wealth than he could ever spend. He was called a visionary by many and a genius by some. Yet, in this quiet moment, looking down at the brown fields and ruined villages of Earth, he felt small. Memories from his younger days flashed before him. The sound of laughter at the family farm, the smell of fresh bread from his wife's kitchen, and the sight of his little daughter running through the fields came rushing back. He had promised her that he would make life better for everyone. That promise now felt like a shadow he could not escape. The shuttle landed with a soft hum near what was once his family farm. The place looked smaller than he remembered. The gate was still there, though the paint had faded and the metal looked worn. Grass and weeds had grown around the fence. He stepped down slowly, his boots touching the dry soil that cracked under his weight. It was strange to feel real ground again after living for so long on metal floors in space. The wind brushed against his face, carrying the scent of earth and old wood. For a moment he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He felt both peace and pain at once. As he walked toward the gate, he noticed a small figure moving slowly near the entrance. Someone was cleaning the ground, sweeping away the dust and leaves that had gathered there. At first he thought it was one of the workers he used to hire long ago. But as he came closer, he saw the small hands, the worn shoes, and the simple clothes. The figure was bending forward, brushing the dust from the gate with care. Then he saw her face. It was his daughter, Mira. Rian froze where he stood. His heart began to beat faster. He had not seen her for almost 5 years. He thought she had moved to one of the orbital colonies with her cousins, where life was safe and easy. Seeing her here alone, cleaning this old gate, broke something inside him. She looked older now, maybe 18 or 19. Her hair was tied back, her face thin but calm. There was strength in her eyes, the same eyes her mother once had. He took a few slow steps forward. His voice trembled as he called her name. Mira. She stopped sweeping. For a moment she didn't turn. The wind blew gently, carrying away some of the dust between them. When she finally looked up, her eyes widened. She dropped the broom and ran toward him. Rian opened his arms and she held him tightly. Neither spoke for several seconds. The silence between them said everything words could not. When she finally pulled away, Rian looked at her with sadness and pride. "You are here. I thought you left Earth," he said softly. Mira shook her head and smiled faintly. "I stayed. Someone had to take care of the farm." Her voice was calm but carried a quiet strength that made Rian feel small again. He looked around the farm. The house in the distance was still standing, though the roof had been repaired many times. The fields were mostly dry, but a few green patches showed signs of life. There were tools stacked near the barn, and small machines powered by solar cells humming weakly in the sunlight. Rian felt a heavy weight in his chest. He had left her here believing she would follow the others into the stars. He had sent money, supplies, and machines to make her life easier, but it seemed she had chosen a harder path. "Why, Mira?" he asked quietly. "Why stay here when everyone else moved on? You could have lived in comfort, studied in the sky cities, had everything you wanted." Mira picked up the broom again and smiled sadly. "I didn't want everything, Father. I just wanted something real." She started sweeping again as she spoke. "Up there, everything is made by machines. The air, the water, even the food. It's all perfect, but it feels empty. Here, even though life is hard, the ground is real under my feet. The wind is real. The sound of the birds is real. I couldn't leave that behind." Her words cut through Rian like a blade. He had spent years building perfection in artificial worlds, believing that comfort was the same as happiness. But looking at her covered in dust yet smiling with peace, he realized he had been wrong. He watched her clean the gate with patience and care. Every movement showed love and respect for the place that had once been their home. Rian walked closer and began helping her without saying anything. He picked up a rag and started wiping the old wood. Mira looked surprised but said nothing. They worked side by side for a while, cleaning in silence. The sun rose higher, warming their faces. Birds sang in the trees nearby. After a few minutes, Rian stopped and looked at the gate. It now looked a little better, a little brighter. He smiled faintly. "Your mother would have loved this," he said. Mira nodded. "I remember her voice. She used to say that if we take care of the land will take care of us." Ryan looked at the dry soil around them and sighed. The land doesn't seem to be taking care of anyone anymore. Mira put the broom down and looked at him seriously. "That's because we stopped taking care of it first." Her words hit him harder than any business failure he had ever faced. He felt the truth in them. He had been part of the generation that abandoned Earth, believing technology could replace nature. He had helped build the future, but in doing so, he had helped destroy the past. They walked toward the house together. Inside, everything was simple but clean. The old wooden table stood in the center, surrounded by chairs that had been repaired many times. On the wall hung an old picture of their family, Ryan, his wife, and Mira as a child. Dust had settled on the frame, but Mira had wiped the glass clean. He touched the picture gently. "You kept this place alive all these years," he said quietly. Mira smiled and poured him a glass of water from a clay jug. "I tried. It's not easy, but it's home." Rian took the glass and drank slowly. The water tasted different, raw, natural, real. It wasn't purified by machines or flavored with minerals. It was simple and pure, and it made him realize how far he had drifted from such simple things. He looked out the window at the land beyond. "You are alone here?" he asked. Mira nodded. "Most of the nearby farms are empty now. The people left, but sometimes travelers pass through. I share food with them when I can. Some of them say they want to come back to Earth if it ever heals again." Ryan leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. He remembered how proud he used to feel when people praised his success in building a new age for humanity. But now, sitting in this small farmhouse, he felt something entirely different. Shame. He realized how much he had ignored what truly mattered. Later that evening, when the sun began to set, they went outside again. The sky turned orange and pink. Ryan stood at the gate with Mira beside him. The air was cooler now. Fireflies began to glow between the tall grass. Mira placed her hand on the gate and looked at him. "Do you remember when you used to carry me on your shoulders so I could hang the lanterns here?" she asked. Ryan smiled sadly. "I do. You used to laugh so loud that even the neighbors could hear." Mira laughed softly. "That was before you left for the stars." Ryan's smile faded. He looked down at the ground. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I wanted to make a better life for you. I thought leaving Earth was the only way to move forward." Mira shook her head gently. "Maybe for some people it was. But for me, the better life was here, where things grow and breathe." The night grew darker and the first stars appeared in the sky. Ryan stared at them, realizing that somewhere up there were his buildings, his machines, his empire. Yet none of it compared to this small piece of land, this gate, and the girl who refused to give up on it. He felt tears well in his eyes but blinked them away. He didn't want to show weakness, but deep inside, he felt something breaking. A wall he had built around his heart over many years. Before they went inside, Mira looked at him and said, "Father, I know why you came back. You wanted to see what was left of home. Maybe you also wanted to see if I was all right. But tomorrow I want to show you something. It's important. You'll understand why I stayed." Rian nodded quietly. He didn't ask questions. He simply followed her back inside and sat near the old fireplace. The flames flickered gently, casting soft light across the room. That night, Ryan could not sleep. He lay awake, listening to the sounds of the night, the wind, the distant hum of old machines, the rustle of trees. His mind kept going back to the sight of Mira cleaning the gate. The image stayed with him like a memory carved into stone. It reminded him of who he used to be before wealth and fame changed him. He realized that tomorrow might be the beginning of something he had long forgotten, the beginning of hope. The next morning, the sky was pale blue with soft streaks of white clouds. A gentle breeze moved through the fields, carrying the smell of fresh soil. Ryan woke early. He had not slept much during the night, his mind filled with thoughts of his daughter and the world he had once called home. The sounds of birds outside felt both strange and comforting after so many years among machines and artificial air. For a moment he stayed still, listening. The quiet rhythm of life on Earth was different from the endless hum of engines in the sky cities. He stood and looked around the small room. It was simple but neat. The wooden walls had small cracks and the curtains were patched in several places, yet everything was clean. On the table near his bed sat a small glass jar filled with water and a single green plant. It looked fragile but alive. He walked closer and touched one of its leaves. It was soft, real, and full of life. He smiled faintly. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to touch something that grew from the ground. Outside, Mira was already awake. She was working near the barn, repairing a small solar panel that powered the water pump. Ryan stepped out and walked toward her. She looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Father. I hope you slept well." Ryan nodded. "It has been a long time since I slept under a real roof. It feels good to be here." Mira handed him a small bowl of warm porridge. "You should eat before we start. I want to show you something today." They ate together, sitting on the porch steps. The air was cool, and the light from the rising sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Ryan watched Mira as she ate quietly. She looked peaceful, but there was also a deep strength in her calmness. He realized how much she had grown in the years he had been away. She was no longer the little girl he remembered running through the fields. She was now a young woman, strong and full of purpose. After breakfast, Mira led him through the farm. They walked past the old house, the barn, and the dried fields. Ryan saw machines he had once sent her lying silent near the fence. They were covered in dust and rust. "I sent you the best equipment," he said softly. "Why didn't you use them?" Mira stopped and looked back at him. "They worked for a time, but the parts wore out. The companies that made them stopped sending replacements. I learned to live without them. I had to find other ways to grow and survive." They reached a small hill at the edge of the farm. From there, Ryan could see the wide land around them. Most of it looked dry and lifeless. The soil was cracked and the trees stood thin and weak. The rivers that once ran near the fields were now narrow streams. It was a sad sight. "This used to be beautiful," he said, remembering how green and full of life it once was. Mira nodded. "Yes, but years of neglect and pollution changed everything. People left and the land slowly began to die. I stayed because I could not watch it disappear completely." She led him down the hill to a small greenhouse made of glass and metal scraps. Inside, the air was warm and filled with a soft green glow. Ryan's eyes widened. Rows of plants grew there, healthy and bright. Some were vegetables, others flowers. Small machines built from broken parts helped regulate water and air. Mira smiled as she showed him around. "I built this from what was left. The soil outside is weak, but here I can control the light and water. It's not perfect, but it works. I call it the heart of the farm." Ryan bent down and touched one of the plants. Its leaves were smooth and shining under the light. "You did this alone?" he asked. Mira nodded proudly. "I had some help from books and old data files. I also learned from a few travelers who passed by. Some knew how to restore the land. Others taught me how to use algae to make clean air. People may have forgotten Earth, but knowledge still exists if you look for it." Ryan walked slowly through the greenhouse, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. For the first time in many years, he felt inspired. He had built massive stations in orbit, yet what his daughter had created here felt more powerful. It was small but full of hope. He looked at her and said, "You've done more here than most of the scientists in the cities. You've brought life back." Mira smiled softly. "I only planted the seeds. The land did the rest." As they left the greenhouse, the sound of the wind outside grew louder. Dust swirled through the air and the sky darkened slightly. A storm was forming in the distance. Mira looked toward the horizon and frowned. "We should cover the panels before the wind gets worse." Together, they hurried back toward the barn. Ryan helped her secure the solar panels and tie down loose items. The wind blew stronger, carrying sand and dry leaves through the air. It reminded Ryan of how fragile this place still was. When the storm finally passed, the ground was covered with a thin layer of dust. Mira sat on a wooden bench, wiping the sweat from her face. Ryan sat beside her. The silence between them was filled with the soft whistling of the wind. After a while, Ryan spoke. "Mira, I want to help you. I can bring new machines, better ones. I can send workers, energy cells, and food supplies. You don't have to do all this alone." Mira looked at him quietly. "Machines can help for a while, Father, but they cannot fix what people have forgotten. The problem is not only the soil or the weather. It is the people who left. They stopped believing Earth was worth saving. Rian felt a deep sadness in her words. He looked at his hands and thought of all the people who once lived here. They had traded real air for artificial comfort, real sunlight for filtered light. He had been one of them. He realized now that his daughter had seen something he had not. She understood that humanity could not move forward by leaving its roots behind. Later in the afternoon, Mira took him to the far side of the farm. There was a small pond there surrounded by dry grass. The water was muddy and low, but tiny green shoots grew around the edges. This pond used to feed the fields, she said. It almost dried up 2 years ago. I started cleaning it bit by bit, removing the trash, planting small algae that clean the water. It is coming back slowly. Ryan knelt beside the pond and touched the water. It was warm and alive with small movements. You saved it, he said. Mira shook her head. Not yet, but I will. As the sun began to set, the land glowed with soft light. Ryan and Mira walked back toward the house. The sky above turned orange, then deep red. The sight filled Ryan with both beauty and regret. He thought of the billions of people living in the sky cities surrounded by artificial light, never seeing a real sunset. They believed they had advanced, but they had lost something far greater. When they reached the gate, Mira stopped and looked at him. Father, I need you to understand something, she said. What we lost is not only the land. We lost our connection to it. People forgot how to live with the earth, not above it. Ryan nodded slowly. Her words echoed in his mind. As they sat near the porch that night, he asked, Do you think we can ever bring it back? Mira looked at the stars and smiled faintly. Yes, if people remember what truly matters. It will take time and effort, but it is not impossible. Earth is still alive. She is just waiting for us to return. Ryan looked at her face glowing in the light of the lantern. She reminded him so much of her mother, strong and gentle at the same time. He felt proud but also ashamed for having been blind to the truth for so long. He realized that his wealth and power meant nothing if the planet that gave him life was dying. He had built a life of numbers and machines, while his daughter had built a life of meaning. Before going to bed, Mira handed him an old notebook. These are my notes, she said. Ideas for restoring the soil, cleaning the air, and building simple greenhouses like the one I made. Maybe you can help me make more of them. Rian took the notebook with care. The pages were filled with hand-drawn diagrams, lists, and notes written in neat handwriting. He read a few lines and felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. You've done all this on your own, he said. Mira nodded. With faith and patience. You always told me to build something that lasts. I chose to build life. That night, as Ryan lay in his bed, he looked through the notebook again. The drawings were simple but full of thought. She had written ideas about water purification, soil recovery, and natural air filters. He could see her determination in every word. He realized that these small ideas could change everything if given the right support. He closed the notebook and looked out the window. The stars were bright above, and for the first time in many years he did not see them as places to conquer but as lights guiding him back to what mattered. He made a quiet promise to himself. He would not leave Earth without doing something. He would help his daughter, not with money or power, but with his time and effort. For the first time since he became rich, he felt a true purpose forming inside him. The wind blew softly outside. Somewhere in the distance, a small animal called out. The land was still alive, and now Ryan understood what his daughter had seen all along. Tomorrow would be a new beginning, not just for the farm, but for him as well. He knew that the forgotten ground still had a chance to live again, and he would be part of that change. The next morning began with the sound of soft rain tapping against the roof. It was the first rainfall Rian had seen on Earth in years. He stood near the window, watching the drops fall on the dry ground outside. The air smelled fresh and alive. Each drop carried the promise of life returning to the land. He smiled faintly and whispered to himself that maybe Earth was not ready to give up yet. Mira was already outside wearing her old brown jacket. She moved between the plants, placing empty pots to collect rainwater. Ryan joined her, helping her move the buckets under the roof edges where the water dripped faster. Mira looked at him and smiled. It is good rain, she said. The soil will drink it. Rian nodded and looked at the dark clouds. I had forgotten how beautiful real rain looks. She laughed softly. Up there you have machines to make rain. Here it comes when nature decides. That is the difference. When the rain slowed, they stood under the porch, both watching the land darken with wet soil. Ryan felt something inside him begin to change. For years he had lived by numbers, schedules, and machines that obeyed commands. Now he saw that life moved by rhythm, not control. After breakfast, Mira called him to the barn. She had set up a small table with maps, notes, and old devices. The air smelled of hay and oil. "Father," she said, pointing to the maps, "I want to show you what I am trying to do." Ryan leaned closer. The maps showed several areas of land marked with circles and lines. "These are the farms still alive," she explained. "Most are far apart, but they are run by people like me who refuse to leave Earth. We send messages sometimes, but our power systems are weak. We cannot connect for long." Ryan traced a line on the map. "And these empty spaces?" Mira sighed. "Deserted. The soil is dead there. Nothing grows anymore. But I believe it can change. If we bring back water and plant small algae patches, we can rebuild the air quality. The ground will slowly heal." She showed him another page with sketches of simple machines. "These are designs I made from old materials. They help filter air and collect moisture, but I need better solar panels and small processors to make them work on a larger scale." Ryan listened carefully. He was used to big ideas, but this one touched him differently. It was not about profit or invention. It was about survival and care. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have done more thinking than all the engineers in my company. You have a real plan." Mira smiled but shook her head. "A plan is not enough, Father. I need help. I can do my part here, but the land is wide and I am only one person." Ryan sat down on the wooden chair. He looked at her serious face and asked, "What do you want me to do?" Mira took a deep breath. "I want you to bring people back. Not machines, not drones, but real people. Farmers, builders, scientists, and anyone who still loves the earth. They need to come back and work together. I have seen what machines can do, but they cannot love or hope. Only humans can bring life back to this planet." Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. Ryan felt a tightness in his chest. He looked away, pretending to study the map, but his eyes were wet. "You are asking me to change everything I built," he said softly. Mira looked at him firmly. "Maybe that is what needs to happen. You built a future that forgot the past, but we still have time to fix it." He stayed silent for a while, listening to the gentle sound of rain outside. He thought of the tall towers in the sky cities, the metal streets, the glowing screens. They were full of people but empty of life. He thought of all the workers who left their homes believing Earth was finished. Now his daughter was asking him to give them a reason to come back. It was not an easy request, but it felt right. Later that day, Mira took him to a small shed behind the barn. Inside was a collection of old data tablets, batteries, and communication tools. Some looked broken. Others still worked with weak signals. She turned on a small screen that showed static lines and faint voices. "This is how we talk to other farmers," she explained. "Sometimes we share updates about rain or soil changes. The connection is weak, but it helps us know we are not alone." Ryan stared at the flickering screen. It reminded him of the early days of his company when he used to build devices to help miners and settlers stay in contact. Back then he wanted to connect people. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped caring about that purpose. He reached out and touched the screen, hearing the soft static hum. "Maybe I can fix this network," he said quietly. "If I connect all of you together, you can share resources faster." Mira smiled. "That would be a good start." The rest of the day passed with them working side by side. Ryan repaired small circuits while Mira adjusted the panels outside. He used his old engineering skills, surprised that he still remembered them. The feeling of using his hands instead of giving commands was refreshing. As the sun set, they finished fixing 3 devices. The network light blinked a soft green. Mira clapped her hands and laughed. "It works," she said with joy. Ryan laughed too, his face lighting up for the first time in years. It was a simple success, but it felt larger than any deal he had ever made. When night came, they sat outside near a small fire. The stars stretched wide above them. Ryan looked at the glowing dots that marked the floating cities high in orbit. "Do you ever think of going up there?" he asked. Mira shook her head. "No, I want to stay here. Earth needs people who believe in her. If everyone keeps leaving, she will never heal." She looked at him and asked, "Do you miss it up there?" He paused before answering. "I thought I did. I thought success meant being far from the ground. But now I see I was running from something. Maybe I was afraid to face what we left behind." Mira looked into the fire and spoke softly. When Mother was still alive, she used to say that every seed needs to return to the ground before it can grow again. Maybe that is true for people too. Ryan closed his eyes. Her words reminded him of his wife's gentle voice. He missed her deeply. She had loved this land more than anything. Now he saw that Mira had her same heart. The fire crackled as the night grew colder. Ryan finally spoke again. Mira, I will do what you asked. I will gather people, bring equipment, and help you build this plan. But I need you to guide me. I don't understand the earth anymore the way you do. Mira smiled warmly. Then you will learn. The earth teaches those who listen. The next morning, Ryan began writing messages on his old communicator. He sent private requests to engineers, farmers, and old friends from his companies. Some of them laughed at his idea. Others ignored him completely. But a few listened. They remembered the days when they first started their work on Earth before leaving it behind. Slowly, messages of interest began to return. A few said they wanted to visit and see what he was doing. Ryan felt hope growing inside him. Meanwhile, Mira worked harder than ever preparing the land for planting. She used small tools and recycled machines to dig and clean. Ryan helped her move water from the pond to the fields. It was slow work, but it brought peace to his heart. Every seed they planted felt like a new promise. One evening, as they sat resting near the field, Mira looked at her father and said, "You used to build great things in the sky. Do you ever regret leaving?" Ryan thought for a moment. At that time, I believed I was helping humanity. We had dreams of new worlds and endless resources, but I see now that we were only running from our mistakes instead of fixing them. He looked at her with a soft smile. You are teaching me something I forgot long ago, that the greatest achievement is not building new worlds but saving the one we already have. Mira looked at the sky where faint lights from the orbiting cities twinkled. Maybe one day they will see what we see here, she said. Maybe they will come back too. Ryan nodded. They will, once they realize that all their progress means nothing without roots. As the days passed, Ryan and Mira continued to work together. The repaired network grew stronger. They contacted more farmers and connected small groups. Voices began to fill the static-filled channels. People shared stories, weather updates, and ideas for rebuilding the land. For the first time in decades, Earth's forgotten farmers were united again. One night, while checking the network, Ryan received a message from an old friend named Dalen, an engineer from the colonies. The message said, "If you are serious about this Earth project, I will come. I have supplies and workers ready." Ryan smiled. He showed the message to Mira. Her eyes shone with hope. "See, Father? People still care. They just needed someone to remind them." Ryan looked at her, feeling tears well in his eyes. He tried to speak, but his voice broke. He turned away for a moment, hiding his face. Mira touched his hand gently. "You are doing the right thing," she said softly. "This is what Mother would have wanted." That night, Ryan sat outside long after Mira went to bed. He watched the stars and thought about the future. He realized that his daughter's plea was not just about saving a farm. It was about saving humanity's connection to the world that gave it life. He understood that he could use his influence not to build walls between planets, but to build bridges back to the earth. As the wind moved gently through the trees, he whispered to himself that he would keep his promise. He would not rest until the forgotten ground lived again, and the people who once abandoned it returned with hope. The sun rose slowly over the farm, painting the sky with gold and pink. The air smelled fresh after a light night rain, and the ground was soft and dark, soaking in the moisture. Ryan stepped outside and looked at the fields. They seemed smaller than he remembered, but there was life growing in the soil. Tiny green shoots poked through the ground, brave and fragile. Mira was already there, moving carefully among the young plants, checking their leaves and the small water channels she had dug. Ryan walked beside her silently. He wanted to speak, to tell her how proud he was, but words felt small compared to the sight before him. He remembered his first days building floating cities, the feeling of holding control over massive machines, moving millions of people from one place to another, none of it compared to the simple act of planting a seed and watching it grow. He bent down and touched the soil. It felt warm and alive, unlike the synthetic floors he walked on in the orbiting stations. Mira noticed him and smiled. "Father, come help me with the water lines," she said. "The rain was good last night, but the new shoots need extra care." He nodded, and together they moved buckets of water carefully along the young plants. each drop soaked into the ground, feeding life slowly but steadily. Ryan realized that progress was not always about speed or power. Here, patience and effort mattered more than any machine could achieve. As they worked, Mira explained the methods she had been using. I learned from old books and travelers who stayed here for a short time. They taught me about soil recovery, natural water filtration, and how to grow plants without artificial chemicals. The methods are slow, but they keep the land alive. If we hurry, we might destroy what is left. Ryan listened carefully, fascinated. He had spent decades creating fast solutions, believing efficiency was everything. Now he saw that the old, slow ways carried wisdom that he had ignored. Later that morning, Mira led him to the edge of the farm where a small creek ran. The water was murky in some areas, but green patches of algae and small plants floated on the surface. I started cleaning this creek 2 years ago, she said. It was full of debris and chemicals. I planted algae to filter the water naturally, and I cleaned the banks carefully. Look at it now. Life is returning. Ryan knelt and touched the water. Tiny fish darted through the small pools. He smiled. For the first time in years, he felt hope. After a while, they walked back to the greenhouse. Inside, Mira showed him new seedlings she had planted overnight. These are stronger than before, she said. I experimented with the light cycles and nutrients. They should grow well for the next few weeks. Ryan examined the plants closely. He was amazed at how much knowledge his daughter had gained on her own. You have learned more than many scientists, he said quietly. Mira shook her head. I only did what had to be done. Earth needed someone to care. Ryan spent the next hours helping her repair old machines. Some were broken solar panels, others were water pumps that had stopped working. Together they dismantled parts, cleaned them, and rebuilt what they could. It was slow work, but Ryan began to feel alive again. Using his hands, solving real problems, he realized how disconnected he had become from the world he had once loved. Mira worked beside him silently, her focus never wavering. Her calm determination taught him more than words ever could. By late afternoon, they had repaired several key systems. Water flowed steadily to the fields, and the greenhouse ventilation worked better than it had in years. Ryan stepped back and looked at the farm. Small patches of green shone in the sun, surrounded by brown soil waiting to grow. Mira smiled at him. It will not be perfect immediately, but this is how it starts. One small step leads to another, Ryan nodded. He understood now that progress was not measured by speed or size, but by care and persistence. As the sun dipped lower, Mira led him to a hill at the far end of the property. From there, the entire farm stretched out below them. Fields, greenhouse, pond, and creek all looked alive in the evening light. Mira pointed to the horizon. See that? The wind carries seeds from other lands. If we prepare the soil and protect them, life will spread naturally. Ryan watched the wind and saw tiny specks floating through the air. He realized that nature had its own plan, and humans could only guide it. They stayed on the hill for a long time, watching the sunset. Mira spoke softly. Father, when Mother was alive, she said that Earth heals slowly, but it never gives up. We have to be patient and kind. If we are not careful, we might destroy the things that try to grow again. Ryan listened to her words. He felt the weight of his past mistakes and the chance for redemption. He thought about the millions of people in the cities above who had forgotten the value of the ground beneath their feet. The next days passed in hard work. Ryan and Mira repaired broken irrigation channels, cleaned the pond, planted new seeds, and monitored the small greenhouses. Ryan began keeping a log of everything they did, writing notes for the future. He felt excitement he had not felt in years. It was a joy of creation, not of wealth or fame. Every time a new seed sprouted, he felt hope growing in his heart. One afternoon, Mira led him to the communication hub she had repaired. Several small screens showed flickering images from other farmers. Some were in poor condition, but others were thriving. These people stayed like me, she said. They care about Earth and want to help. If we can connect them all, we can share knowledge, equipment, and workers. Slowly, Earth will remember how to live again. Ryan nodded. He understood that his daughter's vision was larger than this farm. It was about reconnecting humanity with the planet. Ryan spent hours improving the network. He used his knowledge of modern engineering to repair and upgrade devices, teaching Mira what he knew. Together, they created small hubs that could transfer information across long distances. Messages of hope began to travel between farmers. People shared updates about rain, soil, crops, and tools. Ryan felt proud. For the first time in decades, he realized that technology could be used not for profit or power, but for healing and connection. One evening, Mira took Ryan to the edge of the greenhouse. She held his hands and said, "Father, I want you to see the plants I grew from the very first seeds I planted here. They survived alone, without machines, without much water. They are still small, but they teach something important. Life is stronger than we think. If we protect it, it will survive." Ryan looked at the tiny plants shining green under the light. He felt tears form in his eyes. He remembered his wife's gentle words, his daughter's struggle, and the life that waited quietly for humans to care. Days turned into weeks. Farmers from nearby lands slowly joined the network. A few brave souls traveled long distances to help Mira. They brought knowledge, tools, and small machines. Ryan watched the community grow. He saw how humans, when united by care and purpose, could rebuild what had been lost. Each person who arrived brought hope and energy, creating a small spark that could one day ignite a larger change. Ryan also changed. He no longer thought only of wealth and power. He spent his time teaching, helping, repairing, and learning. The years of running companies and building cities faded into a distant memory. Now his life had meaning in ways he had forgotten. He worked alongside Mira, side by side in the fields, in the greenhouses, and on the hills. Every sunrise became a chance to learn, every seed a lesson in patience, every drop of water a promise of life. One evening, Mira and Ryan walked through the newly planted fields. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the ground. Mira looked at him and said, "Father, do you see now why I stayed?" Ryan smiled faintly and nodded. "I do. I understand now. The world above is not enough. Life must grow here on the ground with the soil and wind and rain. People cannot live without this connection." Ryan placed his hands on the young plants. "And I promise, Mira, I will help you. I will bring people, machines, and knowledge. But I will also remember this lesson. Life is stronger than any empire. It grows with care, not control." Mira smiled and squeezed his hand. They stood together, looking over the fields that slowly returned to life. That night, Ryan could not sleep. He lay in his bed, listening to the soft sounds of the night. He thought about the future, the people returning to Earth, and the new network spreading hope across the lands. He realized that the awakening he felt was not just for himself, but for humanity. The forgotten ground could be restored, and humans could reconnect with the planet that gave them life. Mira had shown him the way, and he was ready to follow it. For the first time in decades, Ryan felt peace. The Earth was alive, and so was the hope for the future. He had learned that progress without care was empty. Technology without love for the world was meaningless. And now, with Mira by his side, he understood the true meaning of life and responsibility. Together, they could bring the land back, one seed, one drop of water, and one heart at a time. The morning sun spread golden light across the farm. The air was warm but fresh, carrying the faint scent of flowers and wet soil. Ryan stepped outside and looked at the fields. The green of the crops had grown deeper and stronger over the past months. Small irrigation channels shone in the sunlight, reflecting the water that now flowed steadily through the land. Mira was already outside tending to the plants. Her hands moved carefully, gently touching each leaf as if speaking to them. Ryan smiled. The farm no longer looked like a struggling plot. It was alive, growing, and full of hope. Ryan walked to the greenhouse. Inside, rows of seedlings flourished under the soft green light. Mira had built new structures for the plants, using recycled materials and a few improved machines Ryan had brought. Everything was balanced. Nature and human care worked together. He knelt and touched the soil. It was soft and rich, unlike the dry ground he had first seen months ago. "You have done an incredible job," he said. Mira smiled softly. "It is not only me. It is all of us. People are coming back." The network Mira had created had grown. Farmers from distant lands joined slowly but steadily. Some traveled days through rough terrain to arrive at the farm. They carried seeds, tools, knowledge, and hope. Ryan watched them arrive and help plant crops, repair equipment, and share stories of survival. The farm had become a small center of renewal. Each person brought a piece of their world, and together they began building something larger than a farm. They were building a movement to bring life back to Earth. Ryan realized that the true challenge was not machines or technology, but the human spirit. Machines could help, but only people could nurture life with care, patience, and love. He spent his days teaching newcomers simple methods Mira had developed: how to filter water naturally, enrich soil using local plants, and maintain greenhouses with minimal energy. He watched as the new arrivals learned quickly, their eyes lighting up with pride as their first crops grew. One afternoon, Mira led him to the pond at the edge of the farm. The water sparkled in the sun, clean and alive with fish and tiny water plants. Birds came to drink from the banks. "It is beautiful," Ryan said, kneeling to touch the water. Mira smiled. "It is coming back. Slowly but surely. The earth is healing." Ryan nodded. He felt a warmth in his chest that he had never felt while counting wealth or signing contracts. This was the satisfaction of creation, of care, of doing something that truly mattered. Weeks passed. The farm expanded. More farmers joined, bringing with them knowledge and tools. Ryan helped them set up greenhouses, irrigation systems, and seed storage. Mira led small groups in teaching techniques to restore soil and grow food without artificial chemicals. They worked together like a small family, each person contributing to the revival of the land. Ryan felt humbled by the simplicity and power of their work. The ground, once dry and forgotten, now flourished with life. One evening, as the sun set, Mira and Ryan walked along the fence at the entrance of the farm. The gate that had once been old and faded now looked sturdy, newly painted and welcoming. Mira leaned against it and said softly, "Do you remember when you first came back? You saw me cleaning this gate alone." Ryan nodded, his eyes misting. "I remember. I thought I had built everything in the stars. I was wrong. This is what matters," Mira smiled. It was not just about the gate. It was about hope. People needed to see that someone still cared. And that made all the difference. Ryan looked out at the fields, now vibrant with green life. Farmers worked together in harmony. Machines hummed softly, supporting human work, not replacing it. Birds sang from the trees, and the pond reflected the orange glow of the sunset. He realized that this place had become more than a farm. It was a symbol of human resilience, of care, and of the ability to restore what was almost lost. The next morning, Ryan received messages from the floating cities above. Several engineers and workers who had once built structures in orbit wanted to join the project. They sent equipment, seeds, and advice on sustainable energy. Ryan showed the messages to Mira. "People are coming back," he said. Mira nodded. "They only need to see that it is possible. Once they do, they will return with care, not just machines." Together, they organized a small group to travel to nearby lands. They visited abandoned farms, repairing water channels, planting crops, and teaching simple methods for soil recovery. Each place they touched began to show signs of life. Slowly, the message spread. People began believing that Earth could heal if humans worked with it instead of abandoning it. Ryan watched, amazed, as the world he thought was lost came back to life through patience, care, and love. One afternoon, as Mira and Ryan returned to the farm, they saw children running through the fields, laughing. They ran past rows of crops, chasing small animals and examining flowers. Their joy reminded Ryan of his own childhood. He realized that the legacy of care Mira had created was not only for the present, but for the future. These children would grow knowing that the earth was alive, that life could flourish if nurtured with patience and respect. Ryan often walked the fields at sunset, reflecting on what he had learned. He had spent decades chasing wealth and power, building machines and cities, but none of it had given him the fulfillment he now felt. Watching Mira work, guiding the farmers, and seeing the land recover gave him a sense of purpose deeper than anything he had known. He understood that human effort, combined with care for the planet, could achieve more than any machine or empire. As months passed, the farm became a hub of activity. The network Mira had started connected dozens of farms, sharing knowledge and resources. People returned not just to work, but to live in harmony with the land. Crops grew, rivers flowed, and the air became cleaner. Ryan felt tears in his eyes the first time he saw the sky clear of dust and haze. The earth was healing, slowly but surely, because humans remembered the importance of life. One evening, Ryan and Mira stood at the hill at the edge of the farm. They looked out over the fields, the ponds, the greenhouses, and the small villages beginning to grow again. Mira spoke softly. "Father, do you understand now why I stayed? Why I cleaned the gate alone those first days?" Ryan nodded, his voice full of emotion. Yes, I understand. It was not about the gate. It was about caring for what we had forgotten. It was about hope, love, and patience. You reminded me what is important. Ryan knelt and picked up a small seedling Mira had planted. He held it carefully in his hands. This is the legacy we leave, he said. Mira smiled and placed her hand over his. Yes, and we will pass it on to everyone who comes after us. The earth will remember what humans are capable of when they care. Months later, the farm had grown into a small community of farmers and families. Life had returned to the land. The greenhouse systems were efficient and sustainable. The pond was full of fish. Birds and small animals returned to the area. Children ran through the fields, learning to plant and care for crops. Ryan watched it all amazed. He realized that this work, this simple act of care, was more meaningful than any empire he had built in the stars. Ryan often thought about the floating cities and the people living there. Some had ignored his messages, but he knew that slowly they would see the changes happening below. They would understand that life was more than technology and wealth. Humanity's greatest achievement was not creating new worlds, but protecting the one it already had. One evening, Mira and Ryan stood together at the entrance of the farm. The gate, once dusty and broken, now shone with fresh paint. Flowers grew along the fence posts. Mira leaned against the gate and said, "Father, look at what we have done." Ryan nodded, tears in his eyes. "I see it, and I will never forget it. You have shown me the true meaning of life, care, and hope. I am proud of you, Mira. More proud than I have ever been in my life." Mira smiled softly. "We did this together," she said, "and we will continue to do it. One seed, one drop of water, and one act of care at a time. That is how the earth will heal completely." Ryan looked out over the land one last time before the sun dipped below the horizon. He felt a deep peace. For the first time in many years, he knew he was in the right place, doing the right thing. His daughter had taught him that true wealth was not measured in money, power, or machines, but in life nurtured with love, patience, and hope. The farm glowed in the soft evening light. Children laughed, birds sang, water flowed, and crops swayed gently in the breeze. Ryan placed his hand on Mira's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for saving me as well as the earth." Mira smiled and looked at the horizon. "We are just beginning, Father. The legacy is ours to continue." Together they stood silently, watching the earth breathe again, alive with the promise of a future built on care, connection, and hope. The forgotten ground had awakened, and with it, humanity's memory of what truly mattered had returned.